Hey y'all!
We're having technical difficulties. Hopefully it's worked out. Today, we are doing the Donner Party.
Dun dun dun! Or maybe I should say, dun dun dun! Get it? Donner Party? Dawn. Shut up, I was trying to be funny.
I'm just ready because we did The Shining, which they talk about the Donner Party because it should go through the Rocky Mountains where the Donner Party went through. Dramatic much. Anyways, let's begin. Alright.
Let's fall asleep.
Uh-uh.
I'm just joking.
Anyways, the Donner Party, sometimes called the Donnery Party, was a group of American pioneers who migrated to California in a wagon train from the Midwest, delayed by a series of mishaps. They spent the winter of 1846 to 47 snowbound in the Sierra Nevada. Some of the migrants resorted to cannibalism to survive, eating the bodies of those who had succumbed to starvation and sickness.
Yeah, let's eat the sick bodies, because that makes sense.
Well, when you're hungry and you're gonna get food, what do you do?
No, I'm saying if they died because of a sickness, you could end up with that same sickness.
Yeah, but
And what's the point of eating a body?
when you're hungry.
During the 1840s, the United States saw a dramatic increase in pioneers who left their homes in the East to resettle in the Oregon Territory or California, which at the time were only accessible by a very long sea voyage or a daunting overland journey across the American frontier. Some, such as Patrick Breen, saw California as a place where they would be free to live in a fully Catholic culture. Others were attracted to the West's burgeoning economic opportunities or inspired by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that the land between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans belonged to European Americans and that they should settle it.
No, it belonged to the Native Americans.
Yeah, my ancestors were here before them. Well, some of them.
Most wagon trains followed the Oregon Trail route from starting point in Independence, Missouri to the continental divide of Americas, traveling about 15 miles, 24 kilometers a day on a journey that usually took between 4 and 6 months. The trail generally followed rivers to South Pass, a mountain pass in present-day Wyoming, which was relatively easy for wagons to navigate. From there, pioneers had a choice of routes to their destinations.
So, 15 miles a day? We can go 15 miles per hour.
Yeah, that now. Anybody ever play the Oregon Trail game?
Man, I love that game. Oh my gosh.
You can get it on your phone now.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can.
I can't find it ever. Well, you're going to help me download it then, because I love that game and I can't play it.
There's a little board game too that I have. That's the Oregon Trail.
I play it on the computer, though.
A little floppy disk.
No, you can find it online. Just go in there and play it. It's really fun. You should try it if you haven't tried it. If you're too young to remember that.
90s kids remember.
I remember the black screen with the green words.
You have died
Of dysentery.
It was always dysentery.
Jordan died of a broken leg. How the fuck do you die of a broken leg?
Well, infection.
I guess. I don't know.
Anyways.
It was a fun game, though. Lansford Hastings, an early migrant from Ohio to the West, went to California in 1842 and saw the promise of the undeveloped country. To encourage settlers, he published the Immigrant's Guide to Oregon and California as an alternative to the Oregon Trail standard route through Idaho's Snake River Plain. He proposed a more direct route, which actually increased the trip's mileage to California across the Great Basin, which would take travelers through the Wasatch Range and across the Great Salt Lake Desert. I don't know if that's such a good idea.
Over here. Hastings had not traveled any part of his proposed shortcut until early 1846, so he doesn't even know how the terrain is, you guys, but it's a great shortcut. On a trip from California to Fort Bridger, the fort was a scant supply station run by Jim Bridger and his partner Lois Vasquez. Or is it Louise? Louise. In Blacks Fork, Wyoming. Hastings stayed at the fort to persuade travelers to turn south on his route. Route he's never even traveled, you guys.
Or known anybody to travel. Dipshit.
Yeah, it's swindlers back then, you guys.
As of 1846, Hastings was the second of two men documented to have crossed the southern part of the Great Salt Lake Desert, but neither had been accompanied by the wagons. So they went on a horse. They didn't bring a wagon, just a horse.
And their 5 kids in their,
Sorry, horses can go a lot of places, wagons cannot.
And their oxen and their...
I'm just saying, a wagon, the terrain might be fine for a horse to jump across stuff and, walk across hard rocks and shit like that. But a wagon hits a rock and you have a broken wheel.
And I doubt you had all your sugar, your flour, your everything else.
Exactly. So it wouldn't have taken that long to go by horse, but it would have taken forever to go by caravan.
Arguably the most difficult part of the journey to California was the last 100 miles, 160 kilometers, across the Sierra Nevada. The mountain range has 400 distinct peaks over 12,000 feet, 1,700 meters, I'm guessing. I'm guessing that's what M means, right?
Yep.
High, which, because of their height and proximity to the Pacific Ocean, receive more snow than most other regions in North America. The eastern side of the range is also notoriously steep. Imagine trying to bring your wagon through that.
After leaving Missouri to cross the vast wilderness to Oregon or California, timing was crucial to ensure that wagon trains would not be bogged down by mud created by spring rains or by massive snowdrifts in the mountains from September onward. Traveling during the right time of year was also critical to ensuring that horses and oxen had enough spring grass to eat. So basically what they should have done, this is my own personal thing, instead of leaving Independence in, say, March, right, and trying to make it all the way there in one freaking long trip, right, what you do is you go to a halfway point and have this place set up for people to chill until...
In the winter.
Winter's over, and then make the rest of the trip.
I can't remember. There was a day or a month in the Oregon Trail game that was a good time to leave, and I can't remember what.
March.
Was it March?
Yeah, because it was...
always made it.
It was March, April, or May. If you left in March... You beat the snow.
Yeah.
And there was still enough. You could do it in April, but that depended on certain decisions you make.
Well, yeah.
If you left in May, you were fucked. So, that was it. Nope, you're done.
Let's see. In the spring of 1846, about 500 wagons headed west for Independence. At the rear of the train, a group of 9 wagons containing 32 members of the Reed and Donner families and their employees left on May 12th. They left in May.
Dumbasses. That would be why they ended up dead.
Yeah, top.
George Donner, born in North Carolina, had gradually moved west to Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois, with a 1-year sojourn in Texas.
In early 1846, he was about 60 years old and living near Springfield, Illinois. With him were his 44-year-old wife, Tamsen, their 3 daughters, Frances, who was 6, Georgia, who was 4, and Eliza, who was 3. And George's daughters from a previous marriage, Aletha, 14, and Leona, 12. George's younger brother, Jacob, who was 56, also joined the party with his wife, Elizabeth, who was 45, teenage stepsons, Solomon Hook, who was 14, and William Hook, who was 12, and 5 children. George, 9, Mary, 7, Isaac, 6, Louis, 4, and Samuel, 1.
Godzilla.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. Like, how do you feed that many bitches? Also traveling with the Donner Donner Brothers, were Teamsters Hiram O. Miller and Samuel Schumacher, Noah James, Charles Berger, John Denton, and Augustus Spitzer. All of these names are like really cowboy from like back in the
Really
day.
old.
Yeah. John Denton, that sounds like a cowboy right there.
Alright, James F. Reed, a 45-year-old native of Ireland, settled in Illinois in 1831.
Okay, that's gonna bug me. Stop saying Illinois, it's Illinois. The S is silent.
Sorry.
It bugs the shit out of me.
He was accompanied by his wife Margaret, 32, stepdaughter Virginia, 13, daughter Martha Jane or Patty, who was 8, sons James and Thomas, 5 and 3, and Sarah Keyes, Margaret Reed's 70-year-old mother, 70 years old. That's old for back then. Who was in advanced stages of consumption or TB, and died on May 28th. She was buried by the side of the trail.
Oh.
A lot of people died and were buried on the side of the trail, so you don't know where a lot of people are buried, just so you guys know.
Yeah, they probably found bodies for like the next, what, like 50 years after everybody stopped having to travel by caravan.
And a lot of the wagon trains are where your roads are. Like a lot of the well-traveled, like, routes. So.
Yeah. There was something I was going to say about... Oh, how do you get Patty from Martha?
Maybe her middle name.
Maybe. In addition to leaving financial worries behind, Reed hoped that California's climate would help Margaret, who had long suffered from ill health. And the Reeds hired 3 men to drive the ox team: Milford, Milt Elliott, James Smith, and Walter Heron. Bayless Williams went along as handyman and his sister Eliza as the family's cook.
I want to cook.
So I haven't lost weight in my face, you can see. I'm still kind of fat.
Within a week of leaving Independence, the Reeds and Donners joined a group of 50 wagons, namely led by William H. Russell. That's a lot of people traveling together.
Well, back then, if you didn't have a big party, you were overrun by Native Americans that didn't want you traveling through their land.
You know, the ones that they lived on for hundreds of years.
Yeah. And they were being hunted by people coming from the east. So, of course, they're going to defend themselves against new people coming through. They don't know if these people want to hurt them. Right? Mm-hmm. By June 16th, the company had traveled 450 miles, with 200 miles to go before Fort Laramie, Wyoming. They had been delayed by rain and rising river, but Tamsin Donner wrote to a friend in Springfield, "Indeed, if I do experience something far worse than I have yet done, I shall say the trouble is all in getting started." Young Virginia Reed recalled years later that during the first part of the trip, she was perfectly happy. So one of the kids lived through all of that?
Mm-hmm.
I would have thought they'd eat all the kids.
They only ate those that were sick
Or died.
Or dying.
Oh.
Several other families joined the wagon. Jeez, there's so many people. Trained along the way. Lavinia Murphy, 37, a widow from Tennessee, headed a family of 13. Jeez. Her 5 youngest children were John Lindrum, who was 16, 13. Mary, who was 14, Lemuel, who was 12, William, who was 10, and Simon, who was 8.
Pretty boy.
Lavinia's 2 married daughters and their families also came along. Sarah Murphy Foster, who was 19, her husband William M. 30, and son Jeremiah George, who was only 1. Harriet Murphy Pike, 18. Her husband William M., who was 32. 18 to 32. This one was 19 to 30.
It was common back then.
And their daughters, Naomi, who was 3, and Catherine, who was 1.
I mean, they got married when she was 15, dude. No. They had to have gotten married when she was 14 in order for her to have a 3-year-old daughter. Just so you get that into your head.
I mean, there's a lot of dates and stuff here, but this is really weird. William H. Eddy, who was 28.
What the fuck, right?
They married young, and he was very old.
Carriage maker from Illinois brought his wife, Eleanor, 25, and their 2 children, James and Margaret, 3 and 1, respectively. The Breen family consisted of Patrick Breen, 51, a farmer from Iowa, his wife, Margaret Peggy, 40, and 7 children, John, 14, Edward, 13, Patrick Jr., 9, Simon, 8, James, 5, Peter, 3, 11-month-old, and 11-month-old Isabel. It's a bunch of boys and 1 girl.
A bunch of kids. You imagine all these poor kids.
Like, oh, you have children under 10? No.
There's more.
God.
Their neighbor, 40-year-old bachelor Patrick Dolan, traveled with them. German immigrant Louis Kisberg, 32, joined along with his wife Elizabeth Philippine, 32, and daughter Ada, 2, son Louis Jr. was born on the trail.
God.
Gave birth traveling across the country.
Son of a bitch. I couldn't imagine, really. I'm not looking forward to being pregnant in the summertime, much less traveling across the country. Come on.
On the desert.
Yeah. 2 young single men named Spitzer and Reinhardt traveled with another German couple, the Wolfingers, who were rumored to be wealthy, but they also had a hired driver, Dutch Charlie Berger, an older man named Hardcoop, rode with them. How many people is that? Like, seriously.
A lot.
Like, I want to figure out how big their party is. It's going to be at least 50 people so far.
Mm-hmm. Well, when this page is done, I'll hand it to you. You can figure it out.
Okay. No, I'm serious. I want to know.
Okay, Luke Horan, a young man who seemed to get sicker with consumption every day, was passed from family to family as none could spare the time or research to care for him. Oh,
Poor guy.
you're on the crease.
On the crease? What does that mean? I'm not on drugs. To promote his new route, the Hastings Cutoff, Lansford Hastings sent writers to deliver letters to traveling migrants.
She put cocoa in it.
I put cocoa in it, and it's amazing. Just because you don't like chocolate.
Not really for most.
Lipstick on my cup, really?
Oh. Thank you for being with a lipstick lesbian. I'm sorry.
No, it's adorable, but seriously? On my cup?
Oh, you poor baby.
I don't want lipstick on me, okay? I don't like it.
Then why do you kiss
Unless I kiss you.
Oh. On July 12th, the Reeds and Donners were given one of them. Hastings warned the migrants that could expect opposition from the Mexican authorities in California and advised them to band together in large groups. He also claimed to have worked out a new and better road to California and said he would be waiting at Fort Bridger to guide the migrants along the new cutoff. The immigrants. Basically,
They were immigrants.
But I like how he says it has it in quotes. Worked out a better route.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a second. On July 20th, at the Little Sandy River, most of the wagon train opted to follow the established trail via Fort Hall. The smaller group opted to head for Fort Bridger and needed a leader. Most of the younger men in the group were European immigrants and not considered to be ideal leaders.
old enough to procreate, but you're not old enough to be leaders. Let's see. James Reed had lived in the U.S. for a considerable time, was older and had military experience, but his autocratic attitude, autocratic attitude had rubbed many in the party the wrong way, and they saw him as aristocratic,
There you go.
imperious, and ostentatious. By comparison. The mature, experienced, American-born Donner's peaceful and charitable nature made him the group's first choice. But they sure had a lot to say to him, didn't they?
The members of the party were comfortably well off by contemporaneous standards. Although they were called pioneers, all but a few lacked specific skills and experience for traveling through mountains and arid land, and had little knowledge about how to interact with Native Americans. See, that's why they were supposed to have people with them to help them, figure out where they were going and how to survive in this shit. Because, honestly, if you don't have somebody that knows what they're doing, chances are you're going to die. But, they didn't think back then.
Journalist Edwin Bryant reached Black's Fork a week ahead of the Donner Party. He saw the first part of the trial and was concerned that it would be difficult for the wagons in the Donner group, especially with so many women and children. He returned to Black's Fork to leave the letters warning several members of the group not to take Hastings' shortcut.
They should have listened.
Well,
by the time the Donner Party reached Black's Fork on July 27th, Hastings had already left, leading the 40 wagons of the Harlan Young group, because Jim Bridger's trading post would fare substantially better if people used the Hastings cutoff. He told the party that the shortcut was a smooth trip, devoid of rugged country and hostile Native Americans, and would therefore shorten their journey by 350 miles. Water would be easy to find along the way, although a couple of days crossing a 30 to 40 mile dry lake bed would be necessary. Dry lake bed. That means there's no freaking water.
But yeah,
That's
he went against what they said in the letter not to do.
That's about 3 days worth of no fresh water.
But I hope you got a barrel full of water.
No, even with a barrel full of water and that dry heat, it's going to cause molds to grow.
That's true. It evaporate fast.
The molds are what caused the dysentery?
I think so.
The molds are what caused the dysentery. Bad water. That's what you get it from. Bad water or bad meat. Feces and kind of type stuff. But come on. 3 days without fresh water? By the time you get to the other side, your water is going to be nasty. You're going to have to dump it and get new water.
Mm-hmm.
And clean your container. I know a little too much about the Oregon Trail. I did a lot of research about it. I did a book report in the 5th grade.
You say it's one of my favorite subjects.
Me too.
Reed was very impressed with this information and advocated for the Hastings cutoff. None of the party received Bryant's letter warning them to avoid Hastings' route at all costs. In his diary account, Bryant stated his conviction that Bulger deliberately concealed the letters, a view shared by Reed in his later testimony. At Fort Laramie, Reed met an old friend named James Kleiman, who was coming from California.
Kleiman warned Reed not to take Hastings' cutoff, telling him that wagons would not be able to make it and that Hastings' information was inaccurate. Fellow pioneer Jesse Quinn Thornton traveled part of the way with Donner and Reed, and in his book From Oregon and California in 1948 declared Hastings the Baron Munchausen of travelers in these countries. Tamsin Donner, according to Thornton, was gloomy, sad, and dispirited at the thought of turning off the main trail on the advice of Hastings, whom she considered a selfish adventurer. Do you know what Munchausen means? I know the basic idea, but I forget exactly what it means.
They like to hurt other people or themselves. Well, but Munchausen by proxy is making somebody else sick.
Right, but who's Baron Munchausen?
I think he liked to hurt himself. That's where it came from.
I thought it was hurting other people.
Munchausen by proxy is when you hurt other people. Munchausen is when you hurt yourself to get attention.
Okay.
Like if I were to stab myself, I'd be like, oh no!
Oh, I got stabbed.
On July 31st, 1846, the party left Black's Fork after 4 days of rest and wagon repairs. 11 days behind the leading Harlan Young group, Donner hired a replacement driver, and the company was joined by the McCutcheon family, consisting of 30-year-old William, his 24-year-old wife Amanda, 2-year-old daughter Harriet, and a 16-year-old named Jean Baptiste Trudeau. Baptiste Trudeau from New Mexico, who claimed to have knowledge of the Native Americans' terrain on the way to California. Well, that's good.
It's Trudeau, actually. Baptiste Trudeau. They're French. It's just how it's pronounced. You can say it however you want, but most people don't really know what you're saying if you don't say it right. That's all. Well, then why do you have to be like that? I'm just playing.
So am I.
The party turned south to follow the Hastings cutoff. Within days, they found the terrain to be much more difficult than described. Drivers were forced.
You scared me.
All I did was stretch my leg. Drivers were forced to lock the wheels of their wagons to prevent them from rolling down steep inclines. Several years of traffic on the main Oregon Trail had left an easy and obvious path where the cutoff was more difficult to find.
And she probably had the route, what do you call it? The ruts.
Yes,
Right.
ruts. If you
But
go...
you can still see some places now.
If you go... Okay, we did a video a few months ago of part of the Oregon Trail, which is... yeah, he's weird. At the Whitman...
Museum.
The Whitman Museum. Right, so when we went there, you can actually walk in the ruts where the trail, the wagons went. And it's kind of awesome because there's a little, grass growing in the middle. And then it's so deep that grass doesn't grow there anymore. It's kind of cool.
You can still find places that are like that.
That's what I'm saying. Like, there's places where that's more, noticeable than... With Hastings Cutoff, you probably didn't have the ruts, and
not as many people traveled that because they weren't stupid.
Didn't get lost. Then you get lost because you don't know where the fuck they're going.
All right. Hastings wrote directions and left letters stuck to trees. On August 6th, the party found a letter from him advising them to stop until he could show them an alternate route to that taken by the Harriet Young party. Reed, Charles T. Stanton, and William Pike rode ahead to get Hastings.
They encountered exceedingly difficult canyons where boulders had to be moved and walls cut off precariously to a river below, a route likely to break wagons. In his letter, Hastings had offered to guide the Donner Party around the more difficult areas, but he rode back only part way, indicating the general direction to follow. Really? I'm gonna be an asshole. What the fuck? Seriously? Why? Why would you do that to people? Seriously. Stanton
and Pike stopped to rest and returned alone to the group. Arriving 4 days after the party's departure without the guide they had been promised, the group had to decide whether to turn back and rejoin the traditional trail, follow the tracks left by the Harlan Young party through the difficult terrain of Weber Canyon, or forge their own trail in the direction that Hastings had recommended.
They should have gone back. Yes, it would have taken long to get there, but they would have had places to rest that were safe from all the crap.
You don't know where you're going.
Well, and you can start a tab. You know, they know where you're going. So if you start a tab, you can't pay for it right now. You can always send somebody to pay it later. You know? Because in situations like that.
Did they do that back then?
Of course I know. Mm-hmm. Or somebody would have been like, here, have some food. We don't want you to starve.
Flour for chicken.
Just give me something cheap. Let me work it off. Mm-hmm. You know? For sex.
I'll be a prostitute.
You give food to my party and I'll bang you. Just saying. It happened back then.
Prostitution is the oldest profession.
Where am I? Is it this one here? The arrival brought the Donner Party to 87 members.
No.
Am I up here?
Yes, right there.
At Reed's urging, the group chose the New Hastings route. Their progress slowed to about 1.5 miles a day. See, so you're going from 15 miles a day to 1.5 miles a day. That's how bad the terrain is.
People walk 1.5 miles a day to go to work.
I could walk more than 15 in a day now.
That's crazy.
All able-bodied men were required to clear brush, fell trees, and heavy rocks, and heave rocks to make room for the wagons.
That's exhausting.
Every time you stop, you're gonna sleep like the dead.
As the Donner Party made its way across the Wasatch Mountains, the Graves family who had set off to find them reached them. They consisted of 57-year-old Franklin Ward Graves, his 47-year-old wife Elizabeth, their children Mary, who was 20, William 18, Eleanor 15, Lavina 13, Nancy 9, Jonathan 7, Franklin Jr. 5, Elizabeth 1, and married daughter Sarah 22, plus son-in-law Jay Fosdick 23, and 25-year-old teamster named John Snyder, traveling together in 3 wagons.
There's just a lot of names, that's all.
3 wagons, yes, but they're all part of it.
Party, yes, I know. The arrival brought the Donner Party to 87 members and 60 to 80 wagons. Okay, so now we know, 87 members.
There we go.
But then, like, 1 or 2 people died along the way, right?
Or some of them have left.
Like, the mom, or the grandma died, and there was a party of, like, 7 that went off on their own, on the regular trail that said, screw you people, we're going the right way.
But then they just added a whole bunch of people, too.
Alright. The Graves family had been part of the last group to leave Missouri, confirming the Donner Party was at the back of the year's Western Exodus. Oh, they left at the tail end instead of the beginning of